Let's make a start. So welcome everybody. Nice to be here again. Well, I suppose we're always here, aren't we? But you know what I mean in the session. So as always, standing, feet about hip width apart. That slight drop down in your hips and just turning from the middle of your body. So don't overdo any of these things and don't fret about whether you can do something or not do something. Just have these things in mind. If I say something and you don't understand it, please do ask, because it's very easy to think, oh, I didn't understand that, or I must be stupid or something, or I'm not advanced enough. And actually, the truth is that you're coming to these sessions for me to teach you. So I'm the one who should be explaining it as much as possible in a way that is understandable by you. But quite often in Tai Chi, we find ourselves thinking, like, okay, this isn't working. And again, it's not something to fret about. Sometimes if it's something that interests you, if you carry on a few weeks or months later, if you keep doing it, it makes sense. Other times, it's not appropriate for you. And don't force yourself into a position, a posture, a movement that isn't comfortable for you. Rest when you need to. And for me, a really important element in Tai Chi practice is that we develop a sense of what's going on in our bodies and our minds. We listen to ourselves. And there's no point learning to listen to what's going on when you do a particular movement if you then ignore what it's saying. So I often find my teachers, there's maybe a movement that I know I can do, but maybe on that particular day, for some reason or another, it doesn't feel right, or maybe sometimes we hold postures in Tai Chi, and maybe it's not. I don't want to hold this anymore because it seems to be causing a strain. And sometimes that's just something that passes quite quickly. Other times you might want to think about it and why that's happening. But the important thing is not to damage yourself. Go nice and easy. Think about basic principles. So to develop this listening, it's really a good idea to think quite closely about your posture. Weight a little bit forwards in your feet, helping that feeling of dropping back. Soften your knees. Don't tighten your knees as your hips drop back. And the place where you'll probably first feel it is in the thigh muscles, the quadriceps. When they get tired, give them a little rest. Otherwise, you will start stiffening in your knees. Your hips are also quite soft and quite loose, and so we can turn in the middle of the body, feel that movement resonating up through the upper body to our shoulders and out to our arms. And maybe even down into your legs, because although ideally we don't move the weight in this particular exercise, there's almost a kind of sense that the weight is about to move. So this middle part of your body, hips and waist, that area, is the part of your body that you really want to feel is dropping for the rooting down. We call it sitting quite often in Tai Chi, and that's quite an appropriate phrase. But another term might be hanging, because it's like, keep going, if I get a chair, I've done this with somebody before, but just to show you again, if I sit on the edge of the chair, like maybe I'm sitting on a fence or a gate, and I sit over the back of the chair, and my hips and my pelvis and my lower back start to hang down. And obviously, there's a chair there. If I take the chair away, that's when the muscles of the legs become more engaged. And that takes time to build up. So But that feeling of hanging can actually be quite a relief. And as you get used to it, it's releasing the struggle against the pull of gravity to hold our own weight. Giving a sense of clearing, spaciousness, particularly in the upper part of the body. So as you turn and as you move, feel what's happening in different parts of your body, rib cage, sternum, shoulder blades, belly, wherever your attention is drawn to. And always looking as much as you can to consciously and deliberately release in areas that are tight or stiff. Some areas will respond to that, others won't. And for the moment with those areas, just don't fret about it, don't worry about it, just let your attention move on. A lot of that tightness will gradually ease anyway. And then raising your arms. And let your hands drop down. In this position, there should be a sense of alignment from shoulder to hip to ankle. Nobody's coming around with a tape measure or a ruler or anything like that. So, and we're all slightly different. So don't force anything. But as you stand and you let your hands drop down, something like the middle or the ring or the little finger will be. Oh, you can see my trouser seam here, Pat. Yeah, you can just about see that. So there, you can see it's probably my ring finger that is on the trouser seam. If it's my thumb, can you see how that's started to pull back? And if it's further forward than that, now I'm starting to hunch over. So, if your shoulders are loose, that can be a useful sort of, literally, I suppose, a rule of thumb to this. With a lot of these postural things, sometimes you can try it, get a sense for, oh, right, that's how it feels, but don't necessarily expect to stay in that posture the whole time, because again, the body needs to condition to allow that. When we move from this position to the slightly lower position, we don't get the same alignment with the ankles because the hips have gone back, but shoulders and hips are still in line. And that's true for most of the exercises that we do in the upright position. Even when we turn like this, there's still that connection between hips and shoulders. But certainly for the first few exercises, until we start to turn, then this will be the case. So sinking down and pushing up, rooting down, a feeling of dropping. And sometimes this can be quite a surprise. It's almost like you've ever had the experience of carrying a bag on your back or over your shoulder, and then when you go to take it off, you think, oh God, that's heavy. You didn't actually realize, you become so used to it, you didn't realize quite how it was impacting on your body. And the same thing can be true for the way that we often hold ourselves upright. So as you drop down, there's this releasing quality. Bringing your hands around as though you're cradling a ball. And then, so you're lifting the ball, your elbows go out a little bit, your upper body expands a little. Turn your hands over so you're resting on the ball and press down. So every now and then in the sinking down, it won't happen every time, every now and then we get this sudden sense of a releasing, a dropping. And gradually over sort of time of practice, months, years and so on, we rest more and more frequently in that sense of being rooted. And with the awareness that goes with that, it's not only a physical thing, but a sense in our attention, in our thoughts, that also settles for a brief moment. Eventually, you realize that you're less reliant on the physical posture. So even as you come up, it's not like you're lifting your center of gravity. Think of your root as being like the root of a plant. And the plant grows out of the root. It doesn't lift its root up as it grows up. The root, if anything, should go deeper the taller the plant gets, or further. And then change into the wild goose. Same thing in your hips and your legs, a little bit more expansive up through your body. As always, if the image of the bird in flight is a good one for you, then make use of that. It can offer quality of smoothness, grace. But also, of course, feathers are quite light, quite supple, but quite strong. If you waved a feather up and down in the air, you'd get a sense for that. And so you can imagine that resistance of the air working in the same way on your body. Now, change to the wild goose. This time, you're trying to get your hands to cut through the air. So like if you get the feather and you take it through the air sideways, there's less resistance. So with this movement, you see it's the edge of my hand, mostly the little finger edge of my hand, cutting through. And again, if I come a bit closer, there, you see just about here, there's a natural point of rotation. Don't think this is the point to rotate. Feel what's going on in your shoulder. And if I came to here like this, it would start to get very tight. And I don't want it to get tight, so I just allow my arm to adjust. One more time. And then change to one side of the body and push up. This dragon plucks the stars from the sky, as though you're plucking an apple off a tree, and pull down. Take your time as you switch to the other side, and pull down. Push up. Not too far, just a nice smooth feeling of opening. Remember, we're not stretching. If you just washed a shirt and you were sort of pulling it out back into shape, you wouldn't wrench it out. You'd be quite careful. You want it to open out, but you don't want it to tear at the seams or anything like that. And in the same way, there is a definite extension with movements like this in the system, but you don't want to pull on the joint. You don't want to pull on the muscles. You don't want to lose that sense of space in your body. Do one more of these after this one. Good. And then both hands push up a little just above your head. Keep your hands in front of your body. And then push out. When I say in front, not too far in front, but just a little bit in front. Again, you don't want to do that. Back. Just these two movements for the moment. Once we've learnt the movement, once we've, if you like, have become familiar with what we might think of the choreography of the movement, then they become things that help us to learn about what's going on in the body, the movements, and so on. So, for instance, with this one, if you repeat this one enough, you'll start to realize that the two different movements sort of produce, if you like, or are associated with a slightly different response, a slightly different feeling in your back. First one, this one, is a lengthening in your back and then a broadening. Again, never moving so far or in such a way that creates a tightening in your body. Remember, one of the principal aims is to encourage this sense of movement within your body, both the the expansion and contraction of muscles and joints and so on and so forth, and also the sense of the overall movement, the flow, the momentum, the energy, whatever label you care to put on it. So accounting for that, now we start to add the turning in the center of the body. This has to come from your hips. Your hips move, turn, and the rest of your upper body follows. So by hips turning, what I really mean is that there's a little bit of movement in that point where your pelvis meets the top of your leg. The pelvis will move on the leg. The leg itself shouldn't move. So it's actually not a very big movement because you very soon get to a point where you feel as though you're tightening up. And what will happen is you turn a little bit in your hips, a little bit in your waist, a little bit more in the solar plexus, and so on, up to your shoulders, and then back. So it becomes a sort of spiral upwards and outwards. You could imagine a series of layers up through your body. Each layer turns a little bit more on the one below it, but never so much as to create a tightening, a straining. One more round. And then your hands drop down. Drawing your fingers back, feeling the expansion again in the side of your body. This time with the outward rotation of your shoulder, and then straight down the midline of your body. And then, if it's comfortable for you, just add the turn. That's quite a strong turn. Be particularly aware, so the lower part of your back by your hip. Remember, it shouldn't be a big movement there. Now switch to the other side. And then, again, if it's comfortable, add the turn. Now, we're in a boat in the middle of the lake. This time, the shoulders do go quite a long way forwards, of course, very carefully, knees and back. Again, feeling that the middle part of your body is initiating the movement. One more time. And just sit back into this position once again with your hips slightly dropping back. Arms down by your sides. Just see how that feels now. Let me just go back to something I mentioned there, which is about how far we turn. I'm going to try and demonstrate something. I can find something to demonstrate. So, okay, so there's a pile of books here. So, if you can imagine these books in a big stack, if I turn this book around at the top, it's now overhanging quite a long way, and it potentially could fall off. If you imagine that there was an elastic band holding that book on to the one below, that would be quite stretched out now. And think of that as being like your muscles being really tightly stretched out. On the other hand, if I go from the bottom of the pile and I just move that a little bit, Then I move the next book a little bit, so I'm trying to juggle books here. And then the next book a little bit more. And then this book a little bit again. Now, that book has turned pretty much as far as it had turned before. You can see that. But if there were elastic bands there, they'd still be quite soft. So if you can think of your upper body in a series of layers like this, or think of the vertebrae of your body, nowhere through the whole of the length of your body should there be this really kind of big gap, this big turn, because that would cause a strain in that particular part of the body. And so, for instance, when we do this, what we don't want to do is this. You can see I've twisted about there. My shoulder's gone all the way over. If I hold my arms out, my shoulders are really tight. I'm very out of line. I'm pulling on my legs, and it's a little bit wobbly. Whereas if I turn from here and I turn, and then I turn, and then I turn, and then I turn, and then I turn, this is quite comfortable. I wouldn't want to be here all day, but you get the idea. And it's also quite stable. So one of the things that we start to picture is this series of, it's complete imagination, a series of layers up through the body. Another thing that I sometimes say to people is, if you imagine each vertebra in your spine, there's a vertebra there, there's one above that, then the one on top turns just a little bit, and then the one above that turns just a little bit, and so we get this spiraling movement upwards. Again, nowhere in the body, in theory, is there a need for straining, if you see what I mean. So we want to distinguish between a muscle that's extended, or a part of the body, not just muscle, that's extended, and one that's under strain. One of the ideas I sometimes present to people is it's like tuning a musical instrument, a guitar or violin, something with strings. If you over tighten or if you under tighten, then the instrument is out of tune. If you get it just right, then just a little tap on one end of the instrument will send the vibration of the note all the way up. So once we've got the posture there, then we don't need to put a huge amount of effort into movement. It's not like, oh, I've got to move somehow. It's a strain. Just a little kind of tap, as it were, just a little bit of movement in the right place will naturally vibrate through your body. So now I'm going to have my feet a little bit wider. You can too, if you like, not too wide, and just moving across from one foot to another. So now the movement begins with, and I'm exaggerating, I'm going to move this foot back so you can see what actually happens is, you can see my leg now, there's a little kind of a push through that leg, and it moves my weight. I'm doing it sideways, so just wanted you to see that. But it's not, it shouldn't be a huge strain. So again, if your body's in line, then what will happen is each movement will produce a movement above. I suppose another example might be like a line of billiard balls on a table. You push one and it goes all the way up. But if one is sticking out, or somehow is stuck to the table or something like that, then that will interrupt the flow, the chain of the movement. So what happens is, for what it appears to be little effort, then we can get quite a lot of movement. It isn't little effort, it's a different type of effort. And in particular, as we start to move the weight, it's learning to move from the feet. We have a saying in Tai Chi that 4 ounces will overcome 1,000 pounds, will move 1,000 pounds. The right amount of effort in the right place. So now move across, raise one heel and turn. So raising the heel allows this hip, and indeed this hip, to turn a little bit more. And so your body turns and your shoulder follows the movement of your hip. Again, notice that I'm trying to avoid doing this. You see my hip's gone out of line. So there's a smooth line here. I come from this leg, I push down gently, the leg expands, and I feel like water, like a wave rising up through the body, and at the same time sinking down on the other side. Hold your hands in front of you. Remember that our attention on our arms will always begin to dominate the movement. The arms can very easily swamp everything else. The term that we use quite often to describe the feeling in our arms and our hands is that they're quiet. And if you turn that around, then your arms and your hands become like that person in the room whose voice is booming out, or from the other side of the pub or wherever you are, and you just can't hear anything else because they're too loud. So when we start to bring our arms into the movement, it's done very carefully, and in the same sort of spirit of that expansion of the turn up through your body. The movement builds again like a wave, and now we go into hitting the ball in front of the shoulder. So the wave pushes your hand up and then lowers it down. We're using awareness of our hands, the muscles and nerves and so on, the physiology of shoulder and arm, to create a shape more than we are to actually lift in the hand. So our arms will express the movement. What you're learning here is not just how it works in this exercise, but the way that all movements in Tai Chi build, one way or another. This is hitting a ball in front of the shoulder. So sometimes the best way of getting the arms to do what they're supposed to do is just to use the image, the idea, the intent behind the movement. One more time. And then both arms swing down, cow gazes at the moon. I'll move back a little bit here. So this is one of those movements that can be quite expansive, but go very carefully, please. To begin with, your arms swing up. And really what you want to do is to kind of look to the corner of wherever you are, the room that you're in or whatever. Look between your hands to that corner. And then if that's comfortable and it seems like there's a little bit more space there, you can then start to go a little bit further. But notice what I'm doing, I'm dropping down more. So be careful of your knees. Feel how far it's good for you to move at this point. You want to preserve the space, the flow of energy through your body. You don't want to put your back out, strain a muscle. And then we'll do this one more time. And this time, bring your weight back to the center, straighten your feet up a little bit, hold the ball, and really just using the center of your body. You may find your weight moves a little bit. Turning and then feeling that push up, lifting the ball and over the top and down. Circling a ball. I'm still in this slightly rooted position. It's not this. See how immediately my back bends and everything tightens up. And if you get the posture correct and the movement correct, interestingly enough, and perhaps surprisingly, this is quite a strong movement in the middle of your, well, sorry, the lower part of your back, the small of your back, really. And then go the other way. Good. Let your hands drop down. Feel your arms quite heavy now. Shoulders drop, rib cage drop. Your arms swinging around. Striking over liver, spleen at the front, and just at the tail of your spine at the back. Check out. As you get to know these exercises better, and you get to notice things like, oh, yeah, this one's having an effect in the smaller up my back or something like that, you realize that you're building up a kind of gradual awareness of what to do. You know, I mean, if you wake up one morning with feeling a bit tight in the lower part of your back, this can be a good exercise to aim for. If you start to do that, go very carefully. Always do very simple exercises first. So the best one to start off with in your own practice is just to swing your arms around. It's a gentle warm up, and it's always very, very important, regardless of what you're doing, that you actually give yourself a chance to prepare for physical activity. If you, I sometimes say to people, if you watch people in the morning, watch yourself in the morning. You know, we get up, we dash out to work, we run for the bus, we drag the kids into school, or we squeeze ourselves into these strange metal boxes with wheels and so on, and so on and so forth. And we do all of that without really preparing quite often. We do things to our bodies on a daily basis that no self-respecting sports person would do on the field. Anybody knows who does any kind of sport or anything like that should always what they call warm up. And it's about physically preparing your body, getting the blood to circulate, getting a bit of oxygen into your lungs and your brain. It affects your mind as well as your body. So when you go and do something a bit more strenuous, you're not doing it from cold. The muscles are prepared, your body's prepared. So, you know, if it is the stiff back first thing in the morning, think, well, I know an exercise I can do. Don't do it first. Just do this, nice and easy, just to get your body moving and to focus your attention. But once you've done that, then you might think, well, okay, I want to do this exercise because this is stiff, or I want to release this, or I want to work on that. So as you know that the exercise is better, not only do they become things that you learn from, but they're things that can contribute directly to your own physical, mental well-being. Now, change the stance, have 1 foot forwards, and then transferring the weight. So again, it's a a little bit, it's a nudge. So it can be very strong in the legs, of course. Regular practice will condition your legs. But again, if there's no resistance in your body, so if your posture is allowing the movement through your body, it'll be a lot less effort, a lot less strain, a different type of effort. There are advantages to having a routine. Sometimes, though, that can become a bit of a drag. It can also become a bit, doing this, and at the same time, you're thinking about what's going to happen next and so on and so forth. So sometimes it can be, you can just start to dream within the sequence. But having the sequence means that there's that sort of little ritualistic element to what we're doing, and that's a benefit for both mind and body. This, I would say, is one of the key exercises. I think it's a really important exercise for our mobility, our stability, our balance. It's generally getting around, thinking about how we're using the legs. It's good if you've got problems with your knees or hips, go very, very carefully, but it's a good exercise for that. And then sit back, raise your toes just a little bit, turn the front foot out, go forwards, let your weight sink down, and let the back knee bend in. Both of these movements that begin to raise the foot or part of the foot involve the hip dropping. So, for instance, if I exaggerate when I go forwards, what happens is this hip drops down. You can, I get here, this hip drops down, it pushes the knee forwards, it raises the heel. And if I come here again, I'll exaggerate. If somebody were to come along and push that hip downwards, my toes come up. So it's quite interesting that a movement that initiates the raising of your foot actually begins with a sinking down. And that's a useful image, I think, because it means that we really settle that feeling of being rooted before we start to move the foot. And that helps to give us the stability to take the steps. So now just stepping in, push back. Think about the alignment of your body. Step. Don't think about balancing. If I'm here and I'm tilted over and I bring the foot in, I'm off. So what I want to do, have I got the alignment, which is hopefully becoming a familiar feeling to you, just to be able to take this slow, steady, quite short step. Check out. Have your other foot forwards, and again, transferring the weight, or if you prefer to think of it, the legs fill and empty. As you go forward, it's like water filling the leg, then empty. And then raising your toes and your heel. A very common habit when we do this is that we lean back. And of course, that's when we're stepping slowly, or when we go forwards, we lean forwards. When we do this slowly, of course, that's liable to make us stumble. Useful if you're walking along the road to give you a bit of momentum, but it's not helpful for this particular aspect of the walking. So now step in. mentioned earlier about keeping our arms quiet while we move them. To help us do that, it's really important to realize that a great deal happens between our hips and our shoulders. To take the energy, the movement, whichever movement it is, that comes from the feet, from the ground, to the hands, there's a great deal that has to happen. I've already talked about when we turn, we get that spiraling movement, but not all of the movements involve an obvious turn. So there's many other little things. There's many, we've noticed different patterns of movement within the body. And as we become more aware of them, they become more dominant. And if we can focus our attention more on them than on our arms and hands, they'll provide the sort of energy, the sort of power to move our arms without us actually having to strain or overdo the movement in our arms. So for example, going back to the parallel stance, imagine you've got round pillars either side of your body. And to start off with, just bring your hands back. So see, my hand is slightly behind my hips. And what that's done is opened up the chest, because I'm doing it with both hands. And then I slide my hand around the pillar, so it goes out and around, and it goes forwards. So if I exaggerate now, it's opened up the back. So quite a lot of movement in your ribs, in the muscles of your upper back and chest. And in the sense of the feeling within the chest here, it feels like the chest itself is opening out, and then it folds in and your upper back opens out. You may well notice a response in other parts of your body as well. But it means that we can begin to move our arms, not by straining in our shoulder or stiffening the muscles of our arms, but by beginning to produce this very gentle opening and closing in chest and upper back. Now, put 1 foot forwards. Okay. Move your weight back. Start with your hands in this back position. Imagine the pillars still, and go forwards. So now try and feel that you initiate by moving your weight, of course, and then you feel the movement rising up through your body. And finally, connecting with this opening and closing movement in chest and upper back. And once again, what you're left with to do in your arms is predominantly shaping the movement. And that's what, again, we have the image of the hands sliding around the pillar. Do one more round of this. And then simply cease to rotate your arms. And we go into the movement, fisherman cast a net. Again, transfer of your weight, a strong driving force. But from about here, it's more that movement in the upper part of the body. I'm exaggerating a lot of these movements, by the way. You shouldn't hunch over. It's like I go here, I get to here, and the chest folds in, and that helps to bring the hands through. This starts to reveal a stronger quality in the body as well. Strength not of sort of the straining of muscles and tendons, but rather of using whole of your body, and mind as one unit rather than different parts. So fisherman cast a net, and then sinking back, bringing your hands in, a bit more focused and shaped with your hands, pushing a wave or pushing the boat. The name suggests a stronger action. Time. Again, just as with the idea of effort, we have to, in a way, redefine that. So we have to redefine or develop a different understanding of the idea of strength. It's the strength of water rather than hard rock. So there's a soft quality, and it's the strength not only of the body, because it does definitely condition the body in a particular way, but also the movement itself. If you like, the energy. And again, this is one of the key things in Chinese medicine, to do with the flow and to do with the strength of the movements within the body, as well as a concern with the actual physical dynamics, the actual physical structures of the body. Have your other foot forward. So start off with that image of the pillars again. Your arms will follow the movement. So you could also imagine a very slight delay between that gentle push down through your foot and your movement of your hips, and then your shoulders, the opening and closing. And then change into fisherman cast a net. And then pushing a wave. One more time. And shake. Rub your hands together. Tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Your arm. The side. Round onto your back. Use one hand if two hands is uncomfortable. It's another quite good exercise for warming up as well, actually. This one, around your hips. And legs. Light on your belly. The upper part of your chest. So then coming back to this basic stance, the rooted position, we move from this, we move back into this. So this is embrace tiger, return to mountain, sinking down, pushing up, already feeling the pull on your hips and your back. So just allowing yourself to sink back down. Remember, the root takes your attention down. Just for a moment, there's a quiet, settled feeling, and then we start again. And stand. Take a couple of nice, slow, gentle breaths to finish. Thank you very much, everybody. Do feel free to ask any questions, or as always, you can email me with questions. We can get in touch somehow. I'm very happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Have a good day, everybody.
Yeah, bye.
At some point soon, I hope. Take care of yourselves.
Bye.
Bye.
Can I ask a question?